Joe Lombardi. I know you guys all know that I've been hypercritical of Joe Lombardi and his play calling this season. And there's some interesting information coming out, especially after the 49ers game. Fred Warner essentially exposes the fact that, look, the offense was extremely predictable. He comes out and says it 110% on this video. Links in the description below. So, guys, let's get into it. Bull Bros. Yeah, and guys, obviously check out the merch below. I know we are actually going to be moving our merch around here pretty soon. I was just chatting with my brother this morning, Kyle, about that. So right now it's with Zazzle. I think it might be moving somewhere else a little bit sooner. We are going to be adding some more shirts and a few other things, so check it out when you get a moment. Also, so again, it's hard to discuss this topic to some degree, right? Because we're a little frustrated. I think we felt like we had a good opportunity to win that game, but if you really look back on the play calling, it was pretty vanilla, right? For the most part, we didn't really see a lot of inventiveness, and I think that's the criticism that we've had with him across the board. Having said that, there have been flashes of brilliance. I think again, the Atlanta Falcons game was a great example, but and I also want to say this before I go into this, we got to understand also that the Niners are really one of the best defenses in the league, right? So it's a little hard to criticize Joe Lombardi, but it's also illustrates a point that when you play against a good team, they're going to figure out pretty fast. And we were figured out very quickly in the second half. And that's clearly why we didn't do so well in the second half. Fred Warner, and I'm going to go into this a little bit more detail of specifically what he said. So let me share my screen real quick. And by the way, I am going to be linking all of these articles in the description below. But, I want you to sort of understand where it's coming from. I'm just going to talk about some of these briefly. I'm not going to go through the article because I don't want to, flop screens and so on and so forth. But I want you to have access to it so you can do your own, research, right? So, guys, Fred Warner came out and said a few things about our offense, right? I'm going to go through this article for the most part, and I'm going to reference a couple of other articles. And one of the things I want to reference right now is something Austin Eckler said, right? And Austin Eckler came out, I believe it was yesterday. It doesn't matter that there's some guys that are down. We just need more playmaking. And, he really talked a lot about that in this other article that I linked in the description below. The Niners scored 9 points in the final 8 minutes and won the game 22-16. And look, you could argue all day that we've had injuries, and you know what? We are setting some sort of record for the amount of injuries in the NFL, yada, yada. And that's a bummer, right? But to Austin Eckler's point, look, people still have to make plays, right? And he's right? So in Joe Lombardi's defense, he is right. They just need to make plays. Doesn't matter who's out there. I mean, bottom line, anybody who's out there can make plays. It's not like these aren't the best players in the league. They are the best players in the league. They're the best players we can get at any given moment of any given day. And you've been playing football your entire life, right? And, his point is, look, I'll give you this exact article. I guess he was actually interviewed by Jeff Miller. We got some of our guys who are down, Eckler said, and this is through Jeff Miller, Los Angeles Times. I get it, but that doesn't matter. No one really, created today. We need more playmaking, right? And there's some truth to that. We didn't have that in the second half. We just can't go out there and play hard. That doesn't give you a win in the NFL. And look, guys, that does make sense, right? And I understand the argument. Look, players are never going to come out and say, my coach sucks, our offense is horrible. No matter what, they're going to stand by the game plan. And they're going to stand up with Joe Lombardi, right? Now, the fans, myself, you, all of us are frustrated with the way that the game was called the second half. I mean, again, I covered in my last video yesterday. It was like run, tons of negative plays, just didn't get off the line correctly, didn't do things appropriately, and it was a problem. Now, Now, again, you can also throw the argument out there that our team is so beat up, and the Niners pretty much got everybody back on their team. And that's 100% true, right? They got a lot of good players back. You can argue they still had some players out as well, too, right? So there's a lot of ways you could look at this. But the argument is, and again, I've said this since moment one with my frustration with Joe Lombardi, is that things have become very vanilla. We have become predictable. And that is always the death kiss in the NFL. Now, arguably, right, you could also say, well, that doesn't really matter because you got to go out and execute. That's ultimately what Austin Eckler is saying here is just you got to go out and execute. You got to block better. You got to pass better. You got to run better. You got to run harder. You got to, avoid this contact, whatever. But the problem is that we have become extremely predictable. And in this article, essentially Fred Warner really goes into how exposed we are and how easy it is for us to play defense against us the second half. And that's a problem, guys. Now, again, you can win against a team like the Falcons or some of these, smaller teams that just don't have the same offense or defense like the Niners has or have, not has. Use your proper English here, Andrew. But it's true, right? You cannot beat a team like the Niners being predictable. And that's always been my argument, right? That's 100% been my argument. So let's go through the article a little bit here. It won't be such a long, this won't be a super long video, but I do want you to see that. Again, starts out by saying the Chargers are the most injured team in the NFL. I mean, I think we talked about it. It was like the 2010s, right? I mean, it's just horrible, right? But again, to Austin Eckler's point, you still got to go out and execute, right? Because again, every team is injured, right? Every player is injured. There's not a single person out there that's not injured. They're all injured. I don't know if you saw Derek Carr's interview after, I believe, the last game. He was pretty emotional. He was actually crying. It was a short little video. I saw a couple snippets of it, and he made an interesting comment. He's like, look, these players are out there sacrificing their body and putting all this effort forth, and we're not getting what we want, right? And I've seen a lot of people argue back and forth that no, these NFL players don't want to win. I will push back on that and say they absolutely do want to win. Every player wants to win. And the argument, though, is you want to be on a team that wins. Okay, great example. Linville Joseph, we talked about him coming to the Chargers. Guess what? He just signed on the Eagles. And, look, he's going to go try and win himself a ring, and that's what he wants. And I get that, no fault of his. So it makes me largely think we're probably not going to get Ndamukong Suh. We probably won't get a lot of these players, right? And, clearly there might be some rumblings of some frustrations with some of these players. And so players talk. They talk, right? And make no mistake about it. They are talking. They're having conversations. People text. It is what it is. And, that's kind of where you have to sit back and, have these discussions. So again, coming back onto the point here about Joe Lombardi, again, we all know that he was let go by the Detroit Lions, becoming extremely, extremely vanilla in his play calling. And again, there comes a point where you have to stop and say, I need to do something different, right? And again, I've always said this, what's the definition of insanity? And that's going to probably be the title of this video. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Fred Warner, and I don't want to go too ahead of this, but again, the whole point is Fred Warner really ultimately says he did the same thing over and over again. So they didn't have to change anything, right? And it's interesting though, and this is a big contradiction to what Brandon Staley said in a lot of his press conferences. Well, is that he said, hey, no, we did great. We were aggressor. We were the aggressors. I would argue that we were not the aggressor. We were definitely not the aggressor on the offensive side. Again, I understand you can make the argument that, yes, the Niners have a great defense, but that does not matter. We still should have been able to move the ball down the field because we have a quarterback that is so prolific, and he is so good. And he's so good at what he does that he can be better. And, there's arguments to be made. The league would probably want to see maybe a different coaching staff in here. But again, definitely a different offensive coordinator, right? I think we should have still had Shane Day be the guy. So anyways, so let's go to it. So now again, this article, I'm giving you a lot of backstory to going into the meat of this article, and hopefully it won't get too long here. But Okay, so this is pretty interesting, and again, I'm in the description below on this Twitter article here. The one thing that frustrated fans to blame the offensive coordinator for the play calling is another thing for players on the other defense to expose offense. That's exactly what Fred Warner did after Saturday night, explaining how the 49ers defense was able to essentially stay in the same exact defense the entire second half. This is ultimately what he says, 100%. He came out and said, no, we ran the same exact play, first and second down. Or actually, for that matter, they pretty much were in the same exact formation the entire second half and beat us. Guys, that is a problem. Why is it a problem, though? Right? It just goes to show you you're not doing anything different to change things up. If you're running a base defense at any given moment, you know that you're going to win. Now, it was interesting. I remember watching the game. I think it was in the third quarter, and we were up. I think it was like 17-13. I think it was in the third quarter, and the Niners were driving to score a touchdown, and all of a sudden, the next gen stats said, "Oh, the Niners' chance of winning." It was like 75%. I thought that was a really odd flip. Why would they be at 75% chance of winning, and we were at 25% chance of winning? I thought that was really strange. I think this is a great example, right? You got to understand these analytics. And again, this is a great example of analytics and how analytics is changing the game. Analytics knew that they were running the exact same damn play over and over again, defending us and still stopping us, right? But we weren't changing to get them out of that formation, right? Again, guys, if you're predictable, it is extremely the death kiss. And that's ultimately what is being outlined here by Fred Warner, right? Again, to this point, it's one thing to think this as a fan, but it's another thing to have the opposing, linebacker, Pro Bowl linebacker say, "Oh, hey, it was predictable." So, Ryan DePaul, this is interesting. So the link of this will be also down below. So go ahead and take a look at it and actually watch this video. Watch the video, click it, watch it. I would click it now, but it'll probably freeze. It probably won't work, so I won't. But I'll just give you the highlights. It's a pretty short little video anyways. But ultimately what he said was, look, we just ran the same play over and over again. But let's read what Ryan said here as well. Joe Lombardi's call incredibly predictable offense that isn't innovative at all. We've stopped them in the second half by doing the same thing over and over again. Charger fans and Brandon Staley can't keep defending the indefensible. I think that it's hard to continue seeing this and realizing that's a problem. And again, no football player really calls out things. And again, he didn't come out and say, "Oh yeah, Joe Lombardi's horrible. We knew what he was doing." Look, he just came out and said, "Look, we ran the same damn play on defense pretty much the entire second half, and it stopped them," right? But the point is, he should see that they're running the same damn play and say, "Okay, type in the analytics, figure out what works against whatever they're doing," right? It looked like it was a simple 4-3 defense for the most part. Actually, it wasn't even 4-3. It was more like 4-1. They were pretty much running 5-man fronts from what I remember. Actually, it was more of a 4-man front, but they were still shutting us down. And that's a problem because you can't throw the ball and you can't run the ball in a 4-man front, right? That's horrible. That's a death kiss. So anyways, my point is that it's a problem. And it's a problem that, look, at the end of the day, we're not going, anywhere. For those that may have forgotten, Chargers scored 0 points in the second half, and we only got 60 yards of total offense. 60 yards, guys. That's horrible, right? And again, you could argue, well, the Niners, they're healthy, yada yada, right? Again, it talks a little bit about Joe Lombardi, injuries, yada yada. One of the things I'll say this, and then we'll pretty much wrap up the video here. Joe Lombardi brought up an interesting, when he got let go. If you read the article about him getting let go, I'd have to dig it up, but basically, you started seeing a lot of checkdowns from the quarterback. So Drew Brees was just checking the ball down, and it was just to running backs, really short passes, and largely because he kept trying to go downfield. But the problem is he was throwing downfield into coverage, right? So he's not doing well at intermediate or medium type plays. He's not spreading the ball through the entire field. When that happens, if you're going short and long, you don't open up the middle of the field, and you could just play people where he's throwing the ball. And so, it becomes this part where the defense doesn't have to do much to beat you, right? And the NFL is not stupid. The NFL has the analytics. The NFL has all these opportunities to beat you and to be continually beating you on any given play at any given moment. So, anyways, it's really interesting seeing how this goes, right? So let's wrap up some of my general thoughts here, and then we'll go from there, guys. Look, again, I've always said this about Joe Lombardi. I feel like he's become predictable. He's become very vanilla, and he in many ways is hurting this offensive production, right? Especially with a quarterback like Justin Herbert, right? And if you read the articles at the bottom here, some of the actual fan comments that you guys can obviously read. I'm not going to go through it right here, but look, Sean Payton's in the wings. There's many opportunities for other players to have some real coaches come in that are going to have some innovative play calls. And that's really one thing about Sean Payton. Sean Payton is very innovative in the way he is, trying to move the ball down the field. And again, Lombardi was already fired because of not being innovative. And we're seeing the fruits of that labor now. Now, the other part of the argument is, well, does it really matter because we're not in the playoffs? Well, it does matter because we need to show the league that we can actually play, right? When you show up and you are predictable, even out of the gate predictable, it's a problem. Now, one thing I will give them credit for, one thing I will absolutely give them credit, I have not mentioned it yet, is, and by the way, guys, if you are still here at this point, please like and hit that like button and subscribe. It does help the channel for sure moving forward. So more fans can see, the Charger fans can see, what we're trying to produce here and just have these discussions. Again, we want to communicate with as many fans as possible of the Chargers. Or even of the NFL for that matter, right? And so the other thing that I have not mentioned is Brandon Staley made a really good point during the bye week. They wanted to, because we're starting out slow, they wanted to change up the cadence of the practices, right? So now the teams are not more segregated. They're actually on field, ready to go in formations. So whatever they were doing prior to the bye week, they were kind of having things, like the linebacker groups, the defensive line team, everyone was broken up. Now they're on the field more and longer, and I think it's allowing them to start out strong. We did see that. So that's a nice step in the right direction. But again, the problem is we are not finishing games, right? We started out strong this game, but then we ended horrible, right? We almost did the exact opposite of what we've done the entire first half of the season, right? So guys, it's interesting. It's an interesting conversation. It's an interesting thing to discuss. It's an interesting thing to talk about because, why can't we put a game together that's perfect? We have not done that yet. We have not done that yet, guys. And so, again, it's something to talk about, something to discuss. It's something to have a conversation with. But what do you guys think, right? I know, again, you guys all know this, that James, myself, and Kyle, and my sister are actually going to be at the game on Sunday, Chargers Chiefs. So we're excited to be at that game. But guys, if we show up and play the way we played against the Niners, we're not going to beat the Chiefs. We all know that, right? So, we've got to show something different, especially with the beat up line that we have, defensive line that we have right now. It'd be very interesting to see how we can stop the run. I mean, I'm going to be very, very interested to see what happens there, guys, right? So again, we need to see something different from Joe Lombardi. And I really hope some of this information resonates to him, that we could switch things up, that we could try to do something different. I mean, even if the damn play doesn't work, do something different, right? Again, I go back to the beginning of our bye week. There were a number of these plays that we ran against the Falcons. We had 2 3-and-outs at the very beginning of that game. 2 3-and-outs. One was like a jet sweep that pretty much went nowhere to Bandy. And then there were a couple just kind of motion type plays, right? A lot of things didn't work. But what it did do is it loosened up the box. It made the defense go, wait a minute, I can't continue to stay in that same play defensively because that play would be open next time. Well, start switching things up. Be less predictable. Hell, I've even thought about this as a head coach. Why don't you just put yourself on a play call rotation, right? Say, okay, fine. I I'm going to run five. What's my best 5-yard play? Great. Well, there's 10 of them here. Pick number 7 this time, pick number 8 that time, and just make it completely random, even for yourself, because there is a conversation about something called recency bias. I don't know if you've ever heard of that before, but when something works really well, or you have a belief in something, okay, this is my go-to play, you're going to continue calling it. And again, I think that's really what Joe Lombardi suffers from, is recency bias, is he tends to think these same plays that have worked in the past are going to work in the present. That does not happen in the NFL, especially when you know that's what you're doing. And again, they have analytics breakdowns of what we are running as well. If they're saying, okay, 60% of the time on 5th or 3rd down, he runs this play, or 30% of the time on 2nd down, he runs this play, that defense is going to dial up the exact same thing to stop that play. So again, we could discuss this forever. But what do you guys think? I know you guys have been pretty harsh on Joe Lombardi. I've been harsh on Joe Lombardi. And again, I think he's hindering our team's success. I really do believe that. But let's start a discussion. I want you to read these articles. What do you guys think? Agree or disagree with me? You might actually like Joe Lombardi. I'd love to see why. I'd love to see, what I'm missing. And, let's see what your thoughts are. So as always, guys, Andrew Boltbros here. See you guys in the next one. Bolt Bros!